Hi
Hi,
Sarah, how are you?
Becky. I'm great, thanks. How are you doing? Maybe you can just kick off with an introduction to this documentary. It's quite a unique one. What can people expect if they're going to watch "Twas the Fight Before Christmas"?
Yeah, I think it's a romp through a story about differences and tolerance, but wrapped up in a Christmas bundle. You know, it's a story that's about the conversation that everyone's having across the globe about truth and division, but in a sort of festive package.
And how did you come to make this documentary? I mean, what was your way in? Did you first hear about the story in the news? And obviously, it's your first feature documentary, I believe. What made you think this was the right story to kind of plunge headfirst into it?
Yeah, I mean, so I read about this. It was in the Daily Mail, actually. I read it in 2019, I think, July, in the summer of 2019. And it just felt really refreshing. You know, it is unique. It felt kind of, having have a sort of a career in some quite serious, kind of difficult, sensitive access type docs. This felt serious, but in a way that was light-hearted enough to entice people into want to watch it, and I really enjoyed that the themes were really universal. You don't have to be American or live in a homeowners association to understand that this is a film about tolerance and differences and how we get alongside each other, how we get on alongside each other. But also it just had this kind of creative scope that was really exciting, and it just felt kind of exciting and different. And I was really in touch with Jeremy. He, you'll be not surprised to know he took no, excuse me, he didn't take any encouraging to get on board, and then sort of started the quite long and difficult conversation with the neighbourhood around access, because they were all very nervous and worried about litigation, which they still are, I think. But yeah, I did eventually get there. It was sort of a 2-year conversation with a couple of the people in the neighborhood whose stories we felt were really important, a couple of whom we didn't get, but the ones we did, I think, are really valuable. And I'm very glad they decided to take part.
My connection, I don't know if it's your side or my side, is quite wobbly. I don't know. Are you hearing me well?
I can hear you okay.
Okay, we'll just crack on. It's just sometimes cutting out a bit when you're speaking, but
I'm sorry.
I don't know if it's whose side it is. So I guess my next question is, what was that journey like then for you? Because of course, in order to kind of, speak to all these people, you must have been involved in their lives over such a long period of time. And like you say, having to kind of build their trust. So what was that like for you as a filmmaker? And what was that kind of, how long was the period of which you were making it?
So I first got in touch with Jeremy 2019 in July, and then I went out in September initially and took a camera and just shot a sort of sizzle tape and knocked on all the doors and tried to get access to the people that wouldn't pick up the phone and talk to people on the ground, because it's so hard in the UK trying to get access to a story in America. If people don't want to talk to you, they just don't answer the phone, So I flew out there in September, spent a couple of weeks there, and then still really up until kind of the last filming shoot was trying to get access to a couple of people in the neighborhood. It's a long, slow process, and it's a leap of faith. And although this story seems on the face of it very small, one of the things I really wanted to bring out in the film was, to the people who live through it, these stories are really, difficult and hard and stressful and emotionally draining, financially draining, and so I really wanted for them to understand that I wanted their side of the story to be told. Jeremy's side was very well publicized in the US. And Jeremy himself, doesn't hold back on promoting himself or anything. So it really was very obvious early on that the neighborhood's version of the events didn't exist at all, and I wanted to find out why that was and then hear it, so it took quite a long time. And, they have fatigue of going through this. And Jennifer Scott, who's the lady in the film who was the president of the Homeowners Association, who deals with Jeremy in the first instance kind of all the time, and has a breakdown really from the stress of it all. She was really reluctant to bring it all up and sit on camera and speak about it. She didn't feel safe to speak truthfully because she was worried about litigation. She didn't want to go through it all again emotionally because it was so hard. So it took a really long time to kind of build the trust so that people understood, that I wanted to fairly represent everybody's version of these events, So yeah, a few people who we still would have liked to get, who we didn't get in the end, but for the most part, I think we've hopefully done a good job of kind of fairly showing, you know, a bunch of perspectives, which is really what this is all about. It's about the different perspectives that exist on one thing, you know.
And maybe you can also talk a bit about the way it's put together, because I think what's really great about it, like you say, on the face of it, it's kind of a small town story, but you kind of give it a lot of cinematic value. And, you know, what were the different elements that you kind of brought in to make that work? You know, kind of all the different shots you do, the reconstructions, what you've done with the soundtrack, you know, maybe there's some nostalgia things, you know, from Home Alone or something like that.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, there's a lot there. It's really, the scope was so exciting. It was one of the things that really attracted us to the project. You know, one of the creative challenges in the beginning was, you know, as a director, how do you make a film come to life when the whole thing, a documentary, you know, especially when the whole thing takes place in one neighborhood, there aren't any huge action scenes, you know, this isn't a kind of multi, you know, international story that takes place all over the globe. It's just one small neighborhood and it's someone writing an email, you know. So that was a creative challenge, but it was really nice to embrace that. I wanted people to feel immersed in the neighborhood. So, like, you know, we filmed people just doing neighborhood stuff like mowing the lawn and tinkering with the car and just really small things, but led to kind of hopefully us getting to know our characters, you know. And I mean, with the score, gosh, yeah, I mean, Andrew Skeet, who's my composer, he was wonderful, and he really kind of made the most of just the kind of nostalgic elements that we wanted to tap into. It was really unique musically, I think, you know, but then also the kind of sinister stuff, you know. And we used this technique called shepherd tone, which is where you know, a note kind of keeps going higher and higher and higher through 8 notes, and then just as it's about to hit the top, it goes back to the bottom one, and it just never really finishes. So it gives you this feeling of anxiety when you're listening to it. So we use that, you know, when Jeremy is phoning Jennifer all the time and she's going through this kind of never-ending kind of what she feels is harassment. So that was fun. And then, you know, we had all these kind of other sort of Christmas movies to lean on with the score, you know, The Grinch and kind of, and, you know, you're right, like Home Alone also, it just kind of gave us the ability to be playful. And, you know, even to like the graphics, I wanted to, and, you know, filming Jeremy doing his own kind of reconstruction, it just, everything, it just felt like a lot of possibilities creatively of ways that we could tell the story. And I think the Christmas angle and some of the absurdity of the story lent itself to that. You know, it's not often that you would have a story where, you know, people end up in a court of law with a jury and a jury trial talking about a camel, right? So all the people in the film acknowledged how absurd it was that it even got to that far. It is ridiculous and bizarre, and it kind of all got out of control. So everyone acknowledges that. So I wanted to use that as a way to kind of highlight the sort of absurdity and the bizarreness, you know, in a light-hearted way, because the themes of the film are really serious, you know. So it just had so much scope, and it just felt really exciting and new. You know, some of the things we did with the graphics, the really bold graphics, is like try to underline some of the moments in the film that to Jeremy are these huge life-changing injustices, you know. And I wanted these moments to feel really over the top, because Jeremy reacts in a way that is very over the top. And ultimately, you know, I want to remind people that we're being told a version of a story here. You know, is Jeremy for real or is he acting? Is something I ask myself a lot. And I think he sees himself as an actor in his life movie, you know, anyway. So he lent himself to kind of doing that sort of performance. And I think just kind of the subject matter of the film lent itself to that, you know. And I hope that we achieved the right balance of kind of the serious and the sort of absurd lightheartedness, because obviously to the people that lived through this is still ongoing and has been enormously stressful, you know, to everybody. So but yes, it just felt like a creatively exciting challenge. And yeah, I had a wonderful team based out in the US. The crew were based in the US who helped kind of bring that together through COVID, which you know was obviously a bit stressful. But yes, it was a wonderfully unique story to kind of to grapple with across, you know, the way it looked, for the way we filmed it, to the music, you know, and the telling of it, which I wanted to kind of play out in first person as it happens, you know. So you're on this journey where you love this crazy Christmas guy, and then you realize he's got quite a dark side to him that other people experience is very different to the kind of initial Jeremy that you meet at the beginning of the film. So hopefully it just takes you on kind of a bit of a romp through what is actually quite an important serious message, I think, at the end.
I mean, I think that's the thing that keeps you guessing throughout. And actually, there are so many kind of other issues, even though it can seem kind of like, you know, quite lighthearted at times, all these other issues start coming up about whether, you know, right to have a gun and bring that to kind of a Christmas event. You know, why is one person's rights, you know, in terms of their freedom, more important than someone else's? So what do you think some of those issues that come out are? And I guess maybe to a British audience, it can seem far more exaggerated than perhaps you can imagine happening in a small town in the UK. But there's also lots of issues that are very much parallel in terms of, you know, us becoming more polarized, you know, right wing versus left wing, and different issues kind of all getting conflated, perhaps, whether that's about religion or your right to express yourself, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think one of the exciting things again about the film is that you don't necessarily have to be an American living in a homeowners association to understand these things. You know, the first thing for me is just, you know, we all have neighbors, right? We all have to share space. You all have to share an office. You have to share a street. We all have to get along with each other somehow. We're becoming worse and worse at doing that, I think, and we just are becoming unable to talk to each other. So, you know, this is also about truth. It's about subjective realities, and we all have different versions of events, and you can be an honest person and be a really unreliable witness, you know. So it has this kind of Rashomon like prism of perspective where it is looks very different depending on where you're standing, and that was fun to play with. And I think I wanted the audience to kind of empathize with everybody at different times, and those empathies and sympathies could kind of shift, you know, as we move backwards and forwards and unpack the absurdity of how far this all went. So I think those are kind of really important messages to take home. And also, you know, this is about interpretation. This comes down to how people interpret a line in a letter, right? And that happens online all the time now. We refuse to see someone else's version. I'm right, you're wrong. And the mentality often, you know, is, and I think with Jeremy, you know, it's, if you don't agree with me, you're against me. You know, the mindset is this good versus evil declaration of everything, and that is it, you know. So I think a film that highlights the kind of the gray area that exists or needs to exist for us to actually communicate, you know, it felt really current. And, you know, also just the kind of tribalism of the way that people take sides and the neighborhood kind of group together. And that's really universal. You know, I think we're not always the best version of ourselves when we're under pressure. And this is a bunch of people whose homes and quality of life and finances felt threatened. One of the really important lines in the film actually is Kim, the blonde lady who's doing yoga at the beginning. And she says, you know, at the end, I regret ways. There are things I've done that I feel shameful of, and I have things I've done that I regret, and I gossiped and I got sucked in. And it was really important to have people reflecting in that way of like, you know, yeah, I wasn't my best self in this, and I you know, would rather like to do it differently if I did it again. And Christy says that too. Everyone has a part to play. You know, Jeremy interestingly couldn't say that because he can only see his side, right? He's so kind of single-minded and strident that he, you know, he just, everything, there's his truth and everything else is a lie. You know, he just is a very unique person. I've never met anyone who is that kind of stridently, you know, backing himself of what he believes being the truth and the only truth. So yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it's fascinating to work on. It was really layered.
And do you think in that sense, because obviously it's not a conventional Christmas film, you know, in any sense of, you know, what you might have expectations of like a rom-com or something like that, but there is a message in there that probably is quite useful at this time, you know, where we are so polarized post-pandemic, you know, remembering what's important and not losing sight of that. Do you think that maybe is like another take-home message?
I hope so. And just sort of neighborliness, you know. And I mean, I was telling a friend of mine, you know, I bought my flat during the making of this and have an upstairs neighbor who I was getting to know. They moved in at the same time, and we had our own kind of internal battle about them putting wooden flooring in above me and me being like, oh God, it's going to ruin my life, you know. But how do you manage those things? You want to get on with the neighbors, right? You want to get on with people. You need to be able to get over what might feel like an insurmountable difference. So yes, I think so. And especially at Christmas and Thanksgiving, where you've got people sitting down with their families who are also increasingly divided. I mean, if Trump and Brexit hasn't caused family rifts, like, you know, what else has? So I think that's another sort of, you know, a timely thing, that you've got a Christmas movie, and Christmas is about being together and Christmas spirit and giving, and all of those issues could have come out in the film, you know, and hopefully will be sort of thought about in real life, I think. I mean, I certainly have during the making of it. So.
And just very quickly, can you tell us what you might be working on next? Would you be going back to a sort of more hardcore subject or something similar to this one?
Yeah, I think yeah, I'm looking at a new story actually that is sort of more serious. I say more serious. I don't want to undermine that this wasn't serious for the people in it, you know, because actually I think it really is, but it certainly won't have the kind of lighthearted elements that I've really enjoyed, you know, in the construction of this film. But yes, so I'm looking at another doc that I'm pitching at the moment, based at Dorothy Street as well, where I'm working now, which is also a US story, sort of tied into medical ethics. So
can't wait to see that as well. Well, thank you so much for your time. It was lovely to speak to you.
Thank you. You
enjoy
too.
the rest of your video. Thank you.
Right, take care. Bye.